Confused about how to plan for your retirement? Sean Maloney is here to help. With more than 20 years experience, Sean has created the Retire Happy framework that considers more than just how much you should save. Getting the education and tools to secure your financial future is just minutes away. Welcome to the Priority of Retirement with your host, Sean Maloney.
Welcome to another episode of the Priority Retirement, where we delve into all aspects of retirement planning for your happy retirement. I'm your host, Sean Maloney. Today, we have the distinct honor of hosting Ron Blue on the podcast. He's the founder and ambassador of the Ron Blue Institute. Ron has been a trailblazer in integrating biblical wisdom into personal finance, finding several impactful organizations, including the Ronald Blue Trust, Kingdom Advisors, and the National Christian Foundation. With over 20 books to his name, Ron's expertise in biblical finance literacy has influenced countless individuals and professionals globally. So join us as we explore this incredible journey and mission that Ron Blue Institute is on, and the principles that drive his life and work. Ron, welcome. Appreciate you having on, brother.
Thank you, Sean. Looking forward to it.
Yes, sir. Like I said, when we were chatting a little bit earlier, I've been following you for quite a while. We use a lot of the Ron Blue Institute materials in some small groups we teach at church, and people can find it in the book I wrote as well, where we referenced some of the things like the Treasure Target and the 4-H's and whatnot. So really appreciate all that you and your institutions do to get financial literacy out there, especially with the biblical principles tied onto it. So it's amazing having you on today.
Well, thank you. Very kind of you. So
no worries. All right. Well, we're just going to dive in. So tell us a little bit, what inspired you to establish the Ron Blue Institute, and when you first started, and really to today, what was its primary goals?
Well, actually, the Ron Blue Institute kind of happened to me. The other things that I started were intentional. And kind of backing up, in 1979, when I formed what is now Blue Trust, then was Ronald Blue and Company, that I spent 23 years there, and that to me was the proof of concept in that biblical wisdom and professional wisdom can be combined, or professional knowledge, we'll say, and biblical wisdom can be combined so that you can make really sound financial decisions, but from a heart of God who promises to give us wisdom. Right. So I did that, and then, as you mentioned, I helped start NCF and started then Kingdom Advisors, which was a continuation really of Ronald Blue and Company, except now we train over 1,500 advisors in the same principles that I had developed when I built the financial planning company. So that leads all up to about 12 years ago, I was in London, and I was speaking there, and one of the persons that I sat next to and got to know was the provost at Indiana Wesleyan University. And he and I had several conversations, and I think, the audience can identify with this, but financial literacy, and certainly biblical financial literacy, has not been taught regularly anyplace. Right. And so his encouragement was, if you will license your intellectual property to us, we would like for Indiana Wesleyan University to be the home of biblical thought leadership when it comes to biblical wisdom. So they asked me if I do that. I did that, and God has really provided abundantly there. They have a $10 million endowment that funds the operations. Right. And so we're really seeing terrific growth in that in the Institute, because now it's a lot broader than just the professional financial community. This goes to everybody. Right. So not a long answer, but
no, that's fantastic. So what's the founding? Tell us a little bit about the founding, the mission of the Ron Blue Trust and the National Christian Foundation. What's the mission around those?
Well, out of college, I spent 10 years in the secular financial world as a CPA.
Okay.
I started on Wall Street, and then after 3 years of working with what's now KPMG, I started an accounting firm, uh, which is still going today, incidentally. 56 years later, I guess, or
I
so.
guess you can call that a success then, right?
It's a huge organization. I have not been involved with them since 1977 when I left
Right.
uh, to go on to to work with Campus Crusade or Crew. And when I started Ronald Blue Company, I had a mission, and my mission was to help Christians plan and manage their finances so that they'd have more to give away.
Right.
So that's a little counterintuitive in the sense of the financial or wealth management world.
Right.
My value proposition was if you want to give away $1 million, I can help you. My first
Good
client,
hook.
yeah, we did give away. We did develop a plan where he gave away $1 million, and he gave it all to Campus Crusade. And Dr. Bright asked me if I would come on staff, and I said, Bill, I said I can probably do better for you and other organizations if I am independent.
Right.
But what happened, Sean, was interesting now that I look back on it, because Campus Crusade put me in front of all of their major donor events.
Wow.
So I was speaking then to, I like to say, I ended up with a national clientele of rich Christians.
Right. Right.
And uh, and that in fact was it, because that whenever I would speak, it was always about how you can probably give more than you think you can if you plan to give.
True.
And found that to be true. And you know, Ronald Blue Company or Blue Trust now would have never become a national organization apart from the way it began.
Sure.
And that's obviously a God thing.
Yeah.
I mean, when I look back on the successes from the worldly standpoint, you can always see the hand of God in it.
That's amazing.
And the second really big thing that happened was uh, I was on the board of directors of Chuck Swindoll's ministry, Insight for Living. And Chuck asked or suggested that I write a book. Uh, and I had no plans to write a book. I didn't necessarily want to write a book, but I ended up. I literally had 5 unsolicited book contracts on my desk at the same time in 1985,
Wow.
and that just doesn't happen either.
Right.
So when I wrote Master Your Money, it was the first book that had been published in probably at least 7 or 8 years about biblical finance. Larry Burkett was really the most significant author in that world, but there were a few books that have been written. But the book that I wrote was really a holistic approach to managing your money, which is the way that I approach the financial planning. And that book ended up being a bestseller, sold over 1 million copies, because nothing had been printed before that, or for years. And Swindoll promoted it. Jim Dobson on Focus on the Family promoted it. Billy Graham promoted it as a premium for their ministry.
Wow.
Once again, the distribution of that really was what God did. I
Sure.
never went out and marketed that book. And I also never took any royalties off of it. Because and I am delighted that I didn't, because I would have fallen into a trap perhaps of thinking that my calling was to write books, which it wasn't. But I ended up writing 20 books.
Mini calling.
Yeah, but I wouldn't say it was a calling. It was more a step of obedience
Sure.
as I faced different seasons of my life personally.
Yeah.
Uh, the second book that I wrote was on debt because that was such a big issue. And the third book, I think, was Raising Money Smart Kids because we had teenagers at that time
Yeah.
and 5 kids. And so all I did was talk about how we trained our children. Um, and then I wrote a book to women because that's such a significant need area.
Sure.
And 80% of women will experience widowhood or divorce. Um, so when I look back over what I did, it was really take an obedient step. And then God, in fact, the way I said it is this: I planted, a whole bunch of other people watered, and God gave us all the increase.
There you go. I love it. I love it. I love it. Well, I love that you talk about, generosity as well. And, heaven knows we all need, a more generosity mindset in this world today, right? Both from financial, but, also, your time and talents as well. Um, I think the world would be a better place if we all kind of came at it from that mindset. But when you speak of it from a financial standpoint, and we've mentioned this as well, and I took some of your lead. I even told one of your stories in our book about generosity. Tell me a little bit about, you mentioned that as far as, plan better so you can give better. What are your just personal thoughts off the cuff about, that generosity mindset and really how it can affect not only someone's life, but then the outreach and the impact that has on others as well, and how that all ties together.
Well, first of all, I believe this, that the only way that you can break the power of money is to give,
Sure.
because there's typically nothing you get in return when you give, materially anyway. So uh, what I am concerned about is that generosity and stewardship are treated as transactions.
Mm,
And really, they come from a transformational mindset.
right.
So I would say that generosity and financial stewardship are outcomes of a transformed heart.
Great.
So, and that comes from the experience of working with people who gave a lot of people who gave a lot. A maximum level giver always came from a spiritual base. And at some point, they set a finish line on lifestyle,
Mhm.
and they set a finish line on accumulation. And it was not, it was out of a desire to maximize their giving. Because the question is, do I have enough? And if I do, what am I doing with the excess?
Sure.
Okay, so
Yeah.
we help our clients, and I said is to set finish lines. And
That
then
whole word of contentment, right?
absolutely, yeah, it is. It's for years I talked about how much is enough, and I didn't realize it. And one day I was reading through my Bible, and I was in Hebrews, and it says, "Be content with what you have."
Right.
So I said, I now know the answer to how much is enough.
Right. Right.
It's what you have.
Right. Right. And it's so in our face these days, right? I mean, the world puts in our face constantly, whether it's in marketing or social media or whatever, that, go get more, right?
Yeah. But you and I both know, and actually, I think most people know that you can't buy happiness. You can
Right.
buy experiences, but those are temporary.
Sure.
And contentment comes from a heart attitude. And it's a heart attitude that really begins with the belief that God is sufficient.
Yep.
And He's given me what I have, and that is enough.
Yep.
Because He's the one that drove that.
Sure.
And so if I start with a transformed heart, then generosity and stewardship are going to automatically occur.
True. And
And
that. The
I'm
amazing
going
thing
to,
too, I'm sorry, go ahead.
no, go ahead.
The amazing thing is, you talk about a transformed heart, which I fully agree with, is that in the aspect of finding joy in that, but also the joy that comes afterwards, even deeper from being generous. And even if someone starts off with they know they got to be or they should be more generous, but how contagious that is of the joy that brings not only you but to other people, and that just kind of magnifies itself over and over and over again once you experience that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it is. And that's a good place to be.
Yep, 100%. So obviously, a lot of your teachings are based off of biblical wisdom, and so for the people listening, here today, and obviously it's at the core of what you do, as far as there's stewardship and money's referenced what over 2,000 times in the Bible, right? And it still holds true today, folks. I mean, the the principles that are true in the Bible back then, are still true today, even when it comes into the financial principles. So tell our listeners a little bit about how you integrate biblical wisdom, and this is broad. I know we can't get into details, but in general, the biblical wisdom into personal finance, right? And why you think that's so key for people to understand.
Well, according to Howard Dayton, there are over 2,300 verses in the Bible dealing with money. Um, and maybe I can illustrate it best this way. I had a pastor ask me one time, he said, I'm getting ready to do a series on generosity.
Hmm.
And I know that sitting in my audience are millionaires, multimillionaires, and students who are deeply in debt, and widows, and single moms. And he said, how do I speak to that diverse an audience? And probably my most favorite Bible verse is James 1:5. If any of you lacks wisdom, let him ask.
Mm,
So I'm standing there talking to this pastor, and I immediately said, Lord, what do I say?
right.
And God gave me a question, and it was a God-given question because I had not thought of it at all. I didn't know the question was going to come to me. So I said to him, I said, Steve, when you give a series or message on marriage, you're talking to a diverse audience. Do you change it for the diversity?
Mm,
And he said, well, no. And I said, the reason you don't is because you teach biblical principles, and principles are transcendent. Uh, and they're not unique just to one particular person. So I said, I believe there's over 2,300 verses in the Bible dealing with money. And I would suspect that you, as a preacher, know more about money management than most wealth advisors in this country. And because you know the Bible.
right.
So I said, when you teach biblical financial principles, the easiest one to talk about is probably debt,
Sure.
because the verses dealing with debt is, owe no man anything except love is one, and the borrower becomes the lender's slave, and the wicked man borrows and does not repay.
Right.
So you right away have verses, and those verses are not commandments; they're principles.
Right.
Uh, and so if I can me make biblically principled decisions, I'm going to make better decisions, and I'm going to ask the right questions. And that's what I talked a lot about people. If you don't ask the right question, you can never get the right answer.
Right.
So, and the right question is, what does God's word have to say about this? Whatever it may be. And if I believe that God owns it all, then in reality, every financial decision that I make is a spiritual decision.
Yeah.
And I illustrate that by saying, what's more spiritual, tithing or taking a vacation?
Right.
And
Right.
the reality is they're equal. God wants me to have rest, if you will.
Sure.
he doesn't necessarily want me to be self-indulgent in that rest, but he wants me to take a Sabbath rest periodically. So when I use money for a vacation, I am accomplishing a biblical purpose. When I send my kids to a Christian school, for example, people a lot of times look at that as a financial decision, but it's not. It's a values decision.
Yeah.
So almost, in fact, every decision is really a values decision.
Yeah.
I spoke to a group of young marrieds a couple of weeks ago, and uh, said, if you show me your bank statements and your credit card statements, I can tell you what you believe in.
Right. Right. It makes sense.
It does. And the reason that was important to me is because actually my wife was in the audience and I used the word checkbook or check register. After she said, that's the thing of the past. And people
They're
don't
like,
have.
what's that?
That's right. So this is the first time I get a chance to use it correctly.
Well, and I love what you said, and I love how you put it, as well, in your books and some of your diagrams, like that treasure target. When you start with, we all just pause for a minute and remember that God owns it all before we act on our decisions, right?
Correct.
And are we being good stewards of what He's provisioned to us? And then when we're all guilty of rushing into decisions, right, into the emotional side of things. But I know got to remind myself and encourage everybody we talk to, is to take that pause moment and remember that part first, that God owns it all, and how am I being a good steward with this decision? And that's, it really all starts there. And there's so many things that then go in from there, obviously, like you were referencing. But I love that. And I love the treasure target that you guys put out, and how that's broken down. You guys can check it out on the Ron Blue website. You can see it in our book. If you need copies of it, please hit us up. We'll make sure we get you copies of that. So I know you collaborate a lot with, and your institute collaborates a lot with, educational institutions, churches, financial professionals. Tell us a little bit about how that works and how you guys collaborate with, different organizations to get this word out.
Well, first of all, it was with Kingdom Advisors, of course, we were dealing with financial professionals.
Sure.
And that's a big group of people, and so many of them work for big firms. So,
Right.
for example, the first big firm that I talked to, the leadership, was Ameriprise,
Okay.
and they have 12,000 advisors. And several of the Christians that were working as advisors for Ameriprise wanted to be able to use some of the materials that we had, and wanted to identify themselves as Christians. And so Ameriprise, they asked me to come to Minneapolis, and I sat down with some of the senior leadership. And their question was phrased this way. They say, we market to niche groups a lot. We market to entrepreneurs, widows, and the gay community, because their planning needs are different. They're unique.
Mm-hmm.
So, like women, if you're marketing to a widow or divorcee, that's a different type of advice that you would give than to an entrepreneur.
Sure.
So their question was, is there an evangelical market? And we did a little bit of research and we said, yeah, and it's really big.
Right. Right.
Okay. So they allowed the formation of a Christian focus group within Ameriprise, within their organization. And what they found was out of their top 100 producers, of the 12,000, 60% of them, or 60 of them, were members of the Christian focus group.
Hmm.
So now you're talking about their significant producers were believers.
Right.
So they began to allow them to market, and they're now one of our biggest fans. And then what happened next was we were training people, and we called it a qualified kingdom advisor because it didn't have academic background, so it wasn't necessarily a certification.
Sure.
But when and the Wall Street firms um, would typically they would not allow the use of that designation in any of the materials that their advisors used. And as we watched that develop, we said, you know what they demand for recognition makes sense. And that was that the designations that they would permit had academic rigor behind them.
Sure.
And secondly, they had such rigor that probably only 70% of the people could pass after going through the trainings.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And third is they had continuing education to maintain that certification.
Right.
So we said, we can do that. And that's where we were already at Indiana Wesleyan University. So moving into the university was nothing.
Sure.
And we formed redid the content curriculum. And Wall Street now is allowing the promotion of that designation.
That's fantastic.
Everybody. So that was the professional community, and that was really step one. And step two was, can we take what we were doing with the Ronald Blue Institute in Indiana Wesleyan to other universities? And God opened doors for us, big time doors. And one of the first doors he opened was Liberty University.
Sure.
I was at Liberty 2 weeks ago, and they have 140,000 students.
Wow.
17,000 on campus and 123,000 online. And they came in big time. They designated set up a center for financial literacy, hired a director for it, paid her $100,000 a year. She was really, really bright and really, really good.
Sure.
And when I was at Liberty 2 weeks ago, I met with the dean of the School of Divinity. And in the School of Divinity, they have 10,000 students. Now that's 10,000 future preachers, stewardship pastors, missionaries.
Right.
These are people that are want to be full-time and working in the Christian world. And so we brainstormed a little bit and said, what would it look like? What do we have to do to make sure that those 10,000 leave Liberty understanding the biblical principles of money and money management?
Yeah.
So, and then we're able to do that at other universities. And we're now working more or less with probably 50 or 60 universities, Christian universities. And now we're even at our last conference, we had representatives from Texas A&M, Virginia Tech,
Wow.
And Georgia, who are three of the leading financial planning firms, secular,
Right.
or schools,
Sure.
Who we're talking about how can we work within the secular environment with the biblical financial wisdom. So we move slowly and into that world. So now we have the professional world and we've got the academic world.
Yep.
And the third leg of that stool is really the theological or the church world.
Right.
And we've developed a seminary course, and now we're working. Our earlier conversation was about transformation.
Yep.
And that's the job of the church.
Right.
Okay. And money is a terrific entree to the heart.
Sure.
And
everybody.
So we're working with churches now. We've got 8 pilot churches that we're working with, and we're suggesting that they treat financial wisdom ministry not as stewardship, but as financial wisdom. Stewardship being the result, again. And that they consider finances as an ongoing ministry of the church. Because it's the one thing that's transcendent to everybody sitting in the pews.
Right.
Is money. So that's the churches we've been working with are really grabbing a hold of that, because they never had as much material as what we have at the Institute to give to them.
Yeah.
Over a 50-year career, I answered a lot of questions.
Right.
And had a lot of intellectual property. So God opened that door also. And so now we got a three-legged stool, and I'd look at it, and I think that where we are in the Christian world right now is on the cusp of an opportunity that we've never had. And there's a piece of this. The world knows intuitively that money is not the answer to happiness.
Sure.
It's too obvious that it's not.
Right.
How many wives do billionaires have or have had? So we have an opportunity, I think, right now in the church to offer to the body of Christ something that can change the culture in a church.
Right.
Because Billy Graham said it this way: if you get your money right, the rest of life tends to work out.
True. I mean, it drives so many people. I mean, it's top of mind. Like you said earlier, it's a common thread, that everybody has to deal with. And it's a common thread that's in their face day to day. Ironically enough, I mean, I think it's one of the reasons why there's so many references of it in the Bible is that, he knew that this was something that affects our daily lives on a regular basis. Yeah, I mean, it impacts us in so many different ways. And I love that you guys are equipping, churches that enable them to go deeper in this topic, other than just getting up once a year and having that tithing conversation, go deeper to what that financial principles means. I absolutely love that initiative. It's fantastic.
Yeah, I'm excited about it because I think I think it has the potential like nothing else, because how many people are sitting in the pews, for example. And the people that have gone through our Certified Kingdom Advisor training are, one of the common questions is, how do I bring all of this to my church?
Sure.
And so now we're equipping them, the advisor, to bring it to the church. And we're bringing them into the fold as fellows of the Ronald Blue Institute, so that they're now coming out of the academic world instead of the wealth management world.
Right. Makes sense.
Yeah. And that seems to be working.
Awesome. I love that. Well, Ron, man, it's been a pleasure having you on today. A wealth of knowledge. You guys definitely check out ronblueinstitute.com. There'll be links in the show notes and whatnot. Love your mission. Love what you guys are doing, Ron. Appreciate all that you do. And I deeply appreciate you being on today. So everybody, please check out Ron Blue, the Institute. This has been another episode of the Priority of Retirement, as we help guide you into your future in retirement. Ron, have a great day. God bless.
Thank you, Sean. I sure enjoyed it.
Thanks for listening to the Priority of Retirement with Sean Maloney. If you enjoyed the show, please rate, review, and subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. For more free resources to help with your retirement journey, go to retirewisepro.com or check the link in the show notes. You can also download a free copy of Sean's book, The Priority of Retirement, or reach out to discuss working with him directly at retirewisepro.com. Thanks for listening.